apparently there's an issue with how much teams are scoring. Have y'all been seeing how much teams are scoring lately?
I seen Jimmy Highroll's video on
I
it.
ain't gonna lie,
Shit's crazy.
I was kind of casual the past couple of days.
Was there like for the first time 5 teams scored above like 140 points or something like that?
150, I think. Or one, it might have been 140. It might have been 140.
I do consider what OKC got going on some glitchy. No, I say I say this is glitch.
I think it's on some like the first 30 games. There's already been 80 total games that had 130 points each from each team. But like a decade prior, up to this point, there's only been like 4 or something along those lines.
Let me play JJ Redick's video because he'll explain it for us.
What's happening? Why is the offensive rating going up? Why is it harder and harder to get stops? Let's start with a 3-point shot. Going back to 2013, 2014, teams on average are shooting 13 more 3-point attempts per game than they were 10 years ago. Despite the fact that free throws are way down, drives have increased. They've increased almost 50% on average. The Thunder this year, they're averaging 61 drives a game. 10 years ago, teams averaged around 34 drives per game. They're putting pressure on the rim. You're forced to have help with the spacing, which leads to more threes. Points in the paint. Teams are scoring almost 8 more points in the paint on average in today's NBA than they were 10 years ago, despite the fact that everyone complains that all we do is shoot threes. Driving kicks. 10 years ago, teams scored 0.89 points per possession on driving kicks. Today, it's 1.03 points per possession on driving kicks. Again, despite the fact that the 3-point percentage has barely moved. It's barely increased. We're just taking more of them. And because of the threat of the 3, we're getting to the rim more and scoring at the rim more. The other thing all that spacing has done, it has given the best players the opportunity to operate in space, to isolate in space, not in tight quarters. This is why it's harder than ever to guard. This is why it's harder than ever to get stops. There's too much space. Guys are shooting deep threes. Oh, and guys are shooting threes off the dribble. The argument that players today are getting to the free throw line more because they're flopping is not exactly true. Free throw rates across the NBA have gone down every single decade since 1980. The point in all this is teams have gotten smarter. Analytics have driven so much of this offensive movement in the NBA. We're taking better shots. We're taking higher quality shots. The 96-97 Bulls, who won 69 games and won an NBA championship, had the best offense. This year, they'd have the 22nd best offense by numbers. So whenever someone tells you a player from a different era would kill it in today's NBA, they're probably right, because Michael Jordan never had this kind of space. The ability to put lineups on the court with all 5 guys being able to space to 3, sometimes at least 4, and then that space creating lanes to drive the basketball. That ultimately is what is driving the increase in offense. It's not because NBA players don't want to get stops. What?
No, that last part is cap. He lied on that one.
That they don't want to get stops?
Yeah. It's too much buddy ball out here. I listen to Steven Jackson too. He said it's too much buddy ball.
The fuck was Steven Jackson? All right.
Not too much. Our defense is not catching up. Like what? I hear what JJ's saying, but at some point you would think that the defenses would catch up.
How do you catch up with that? You can't. How do you catch up with guys being able to shoot 3-pointers deeper than ever, and literally they're scheming their offenses to spread out the floor? What are you gonna do? Run a fucking 4-1 zone? Like I don't. What is catching up with that? Like how do you gonna run a 1-2-2? Like I don't. How do you catch up with offenses doing that?
I think the problem was truly the big man renaissance in terms of big men who, hey, if you learn how to shoot this 3, you got a job. Because once you were able to not necessarily run 5 out, but when you were necessarily able to take out the biggest threat to the paint, the biggest rim protector, you would take that motherfucker out and essentially either A, put a forward in just so you can guard the 3, or B, fuck it, we call them bluffs. Go ahead and drop to the basket. Now you've made the game so lateral. As JJ Redick said, he was talking about drives and threes. That nigga didn't mention a mid-range once. That nigga didn't mention a post touch once. He didn't even mention a pick and roll. Dog, it is just spot up threes and dribble drives. My God. Every assist, niggas, I don't think motherfuckers is passing from wing to wing anymore outside of them little rotations. No little passing conversation outside of that. Nobody's doing that shit anymore. We're not skip passing anymore. This shit is off of drives. It's the same. It's the same two shits. I will always say that Denver team with that there was some Denver team. I don't have the exact year to mind, but there's a Denver team with young Melo. One of them years, way too early. Them niggas would thrive this shit. them niggas would have a field day in this era of basketball. I think ideally, if the question is going to turn into why hasn't defenses adjusted to it, or can they? You're gonna need an entire different generation of bigs, because, like I said, you have an era where these centers are able to reliably hit at least a 3 a game if you leave them wide ass open, and this is new. Your motherfuckers like Robin Lopez got a little tray ball now. Like what? So it's you're gonna need centers who are athletic enough to not only be able to close out, to not only be able to play the to play the person who's handling the ball, but still be physically enough and threatening enough to also be like, hey, who paint this is? And it's such a rare breed. It almost demands you having to be a Zion ass motherfucker at 7 feet. Like players that sound like can do that, they're on the skinnier side, like to a much lesser degree, like a Jackson Hayes type of guy who's athletic and go out there, but at the same time, yeah, all right, but Jackson Hayes is like 190. So it's like fuck it. So like it's such a weird situation. I don't think I'm saying this the right way, but it's such a weird situation. I think it's just going to take an entire renaissance of big men.
And Jackson Hayes. Oh, my fault.
4 Wemby's, 1 LeBron. I solved the league.
I'm not saying that's basically what it's going to take. I was going to say Jackson. The problem with Jackson Hayes is any given possession, he got 2 left feet. That's the problem.
Yeah,
but
specifically.
You think even that's going to slow down the league? Like that sort of line?
No. You would need more guys like Wemby. You would need more Wembys. Just freaks of nature in terms of arm length or size and mobility that can rotate and cover the floor and stop that shot from happening and still be able to recover and stop a man from slipping a driver or something like that. It's going to take freaks of nature. There's a bunch of freaks. So Wemby's and Chet's type of players to just be able to stop that. In all actuality, the reason there's no stopping it defensively right now, and the reason the game is like that is because 10 years ago, people still cared about the big man playing on the inside in somewhat. Like it's the schemes of the offense. Back in 2012, 2013, you will still have post touches, as they said. People still cared about taking your step in for a mid-range jumper. People would pass up a 3, dribble, step in, take the midi because it seemed like an easier shot. Analytics is killing it. Whatever the analytics is pointing at being better and more efficient is what teams are going to run towards. So if the analytics are saying dribble jobs are working way better than swing, skip pass, niggas are going to dribble drive more. That's the name of the game. If they're going to say, hey, man, I ain't going to lie, put the ball in the hands of a creator, give them a cool high pick and roll with a pick and popper or a guy that can do both, a guy that can roll and or pop, and keep some like 2 shooters on the left side, collapse the defensive swing, that's going to be way better than just, hey, man, get that ball to Al Jefferson and let him work. Let Big Al work in the post. Like
I heard that in a minute. Let him work. Let him get big.
Feed the big man.
This is the stat Damo was referencing. For the first time in NBA history, 5 teams scored at least 140 points.
Oh my God. 2
of them almost scoring. Well, yeah, Detroit didn't get 2 points more, but that's 150. Hell, we can even take 2 points off of Utah. That's 150 right there. 140s. OKC was 2 points shy of joining that by being, 2 points shy of 140. So honestly, this night, 2 150s, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 6.
Even the Bucks are 10 points off from being.
Yeah, we're not.
Bucks is one run away.
We're
Shout
not
out Washington.
A lot of it. So I just think it's crazy. There's people also overreacting about this as always. This isn't good for the league. Everybody in their offensive rating at like basically 120.
But
I think it's good
he
for the
still
league.
didn't even describe why it's bad. Okay, the offensive rating is up. Why is that bad? Like, why is that inherently bad for the league?
I think,
I would ask, what is the offensive rating for these teams in the playoffs? I would say right now it may seem bad, but is this a trend that's going to continue in the playoffs? Which I don't think so. That's a tradition. That's like a traditional thing over the last couple of years. We know the league is an offensive league in the regular season. Teams are, not selling tickets. They're not purposely scoring or letting teams score to sell tickets, but defense matters. The pace slows down in the playoffs. And when basketball matters, that's what it is. In the in-season tournament, what was the score of these games in the in-season tournament where players played like they care? I don't think niggas was out there getting one. I don't think that Lakers and Pacers game was 145 to 138. Like I think it was relatively lower. Wasn't it?
I don't think it was that crazy.
I don't think it was that crazy. I don't think when the Pacers beat the Bucks, it was 150 to 128 or 137. Like, I don't think it was that. If it was, then hey, I'm wrong. But
are the Lakers one of those high-powered offenses though?
Fuck no. But the
Yeah.
Pacers are.
But
Yeah,
the Pacers
that's
are,
true.
and they
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. When the pace slows
They're
down,
frauds, though.
and
They're frauds. Tyrese Halliburton is a fraud.
Oh my god.
There you go.
regardless. But that was my point. The Pacers are a high-power offense, but when the game starts to matter, when the pace slows down, the offensive rating is going to drop. Niggas aren't scoring that many points, and it gets back to regular basketball. We've always seen that is a regular thing. I'll go back and look at the last 4 playoffs. I guarantee you, between the playoffs and the regular season, there was a massive drop-off in how offenses were scoring compared between the regular season and the playoffs.
But even if it goes down, though, it might be on some like, okay, it went down, but still compared to the 2000s or the 90s, it's still like 15 points per game per 100 possessions higher, so the point would still stand type shit.
Is that true? Is that true, or are you just saying like it could look like that?
He's just throwing off a hypothetical.
Okay.
Even if that was the case, I would just argue the league is still more offensively driven based off the rules they implement, based off of how teams are scheming and how teams are working, based off of how the analytics are pushing these teams to play, draft, scheme, and everything like that. It's just more offensively driven. That would be my response to that. That's going to happen when you're a more offensively driven league. It's the same. You can look across all sports. All sports are more offensively driven. Football is more offensively driven until most part when you get to the playoffs or into the Super Bowl, then that shit slows the fuck down. Baseball is starting to be more offensively driven. This season was the biggest implement in pace of play, speeding up the games. Niggas was, I'm not gonna say juicing balls. The juicing balls was years ago. That wasn't something this year. But they made the bases bigger. They implemented rules for guys stealing bases to make it easier to steal bases to add to the offense. So Ronald Acuna had that crazy ass goddamn stat line of home runs and bases stolen.
Yeah, the Braves last year
rules.
was fucking nuts. So
They implemented rules to make offense to make the game more offensively driven. So it's not just basketball; it's major sports leagues around the world. I don't watch hockey, so I can't attest for how they do it in hockey.
They juicing pucks. They juicing pucks.
Yeah.
You did say juicing balls. That was kind of crazy. I ain't gonna lie.
That's what they call it. That's what they call it when you like have a baseball that is easier to hit a home run off of. Juice
No,
ball.
I get it. Yo.
Damn.
Hey, yo, baseball culture, man.
Hey, yo, baseball go. Man, I just want to say this. This isn't the best analogy, but it's going to support my point. And those who get it, get it. Those who don't. Dog, I think the complaint, B-Souls, is coming from people who are simply put crying out in different languages. What happened to the game I loved in terms of the regular season? So discourse is going to inevitably be nasty. I can already foresee. So they're going to be like, oh, my God. Now I have to sit here and tell you why Tyrese Halliburton isn't fucking better than goddamn Steve Nash or some shit like that. And that's just how it's going to be, because the numbers aren't going to be able to support that. And you're going to have to solely rely on playoff shit. A key example of that is the football community is actually very upset about this shit as well. They want asterisks because week 18 is being introduced. Puka's about to break a rookie receiving yards record, and I think there's 2 other records I can't remember. Football fans remind me, but there's rookie records that are about to be broken. Tyreek Hill's 2K yardage seems like it's destined to happen at some point, and whether it's this season or not, it seems like someone's definitely gonna hit 2K, and it's like, wow. You're telling me all the years of basketball, all the years of football. And because of this change in different era, now I'm going to have to sit here and tell you and have these nasty man arguments on how, yo, X person is not better. He just played in this era, but it's going to be even worse because like we go from 90s players talking about clotheslining motherfuckers to now they get the idea to look people dead in the face and say, yo, anybody could score today. I could score today. And it's like, how wrong are they? And it's just
that's a great question.
It's going to make this course very awkward.
No, Sage is right. That's a great question because I ain't gonna lie to you. The 90s never keep up with this. That's
But see, and I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. There were players in the 90s that were, if they were given the opportunity, they would have been able to score better. I'm not going to say they would be able to score
Dana
the same
Barros.
amount today, but they definitely would have been able. They definitely would have scored better. I know Gilbert Arenas, and I know it's hit or miss whenever Gil talks about it. But Gil spoke on it when how they shortened the 3-point line, and just you can look back at how teams were coached and I'm not going to say a narrative, but the way teams were constructed to play and the name of the game back then. It was a specific way you were playing basketball back in the 90s. If they changed it and allowed more guards to be dominant, more point guards, more scoring guards to be dominant, and weren't hindering guys, you would have seen more guys be able to score. If they were actually more free-flowing with the offense or not as prehistoric, well, I'm not going to say prehistoric because it was the 90s, but not prehistoric because you still had niggas in the 90s coaching like it was the 70s and fucking 80s. So if they weren't prehistoric back then, if they weren't prehistoric then and tried to advance the game then, you would have had guys like Rod Strickland would have been crazy. Tim Hardaway would have been crazy. You had a
Rod
plethora of
Strickland
guards.
couldn't shoot, could he?
It wasn't about shooting. It was about, I'm saying, just putting the ball in his hands so he could score. Rod Strickland could finish like a motherfucker. If you gave him the opportunity to just keep finishing like a motherfucker, he had to finish like a motherfucker. Like he did.
But that's not. But that's not. To me, that's not what makes NBA offenses like crazy dynamic like that. But I hear you. The rest of them couldn't shoot. The full top to bottom teams couldn't shoot though, and I think in the NBA today, there's a great bit of teams from top to bottom who could shoot that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think this is a case of like it. As corny as it sounds, it just makes sense. Like all the data, all the statistics back it up that if you don't play in this fashion, you will be behind. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't play this way, you will lose games. And the objective of every team is to improve players, get more people in the arena, whatever the fuck it is. Losing games is not most likely going to help that unless you're tanking, but that's a whole different situation. But at some point, you still would have to adapt to the era of basketball that you're in, and if you don't, you're cooked. And I think the criticism, the criticism with Sage, I think that's on the money. It is just people just, what happened to the game I love, man? I saw a TikTok the other day of like people just saying, I miss when certain role players could exist in the NBA, and like the game was like perfectly imperfect type shit. Like it wasn't advanced enough to the point where everyone can just shoot. So like certain specialty role players were in the league that wouldn't exist today, but back then they could because again, like some of these advancements weren't being made yet. So like for example, like the point guard who's a great passer that can't really shoot like a Rondo. I'm gonna be honest with you. You don't see too many Rondos nowadays. You don't see too many Ricky Rubios nowadays. But back then there was a space for them. Same thing with like a Dennis Rodman. Just a pure rebounder essentially. Like, how many of those do you see in the league now? So
speaking of Rick Rubio, yeah. Oh yeah, at the 4 especially. Speaking of Rick Rubio, y'all saw him retire today.
Oh yeah, I didn't even.
Oh yeah. I did see
Rick
Rick.
do that purposely.
I did see that.
Send my son back. Send my son back to Spain.